Before we dive into what this introductory chapter is all about, I want you to activate your schema. You know that big word that Debbie Miller used in the video? Activate your background knowledge. What might best practices be? Think for a moment. What did we explore and discuss with that Allington article that may play into a definition of best practices? Having your book available for the rest of the presentation will be helpful as I may refer to certain pages and you can follow along as I give a synopsis of the ideas within the chapter. As you read through our text, our text, you will see a pattern emerge. The same ideas being repeated time and time again. These terms above are the short and sweet definition of what best practice means. Classrooms that are student-centered, letting students experiment, finding authentic and real-world applications or relevancies to what you're teaching. Classrooms that are democratic, where the students have a voice and choice. Lots of talking in these classrooms with collaborating happening. Students putting their heads together and sharing in their learning experiences, working together towards the learning target. It's curriculum that is rigorous and challenging, expecting students to go above and beyond, being their best, becoming problem solvers and critical thinkers. No more of that spoon feeding of information, instead guiding students towards the end goals. In our world of education, many buzzwords have been thrown around trying to encapsulate what best practices are. But just because best practice or one of those buzzwords is stamped on a program or workbook, it doesn't mean that it is true. Our text will sift us through all those misleading buzzwords and focus on what is tried and true in best practices. It focuses on the ideas that will last. If you turn to page 6 and 7 of your best practice text, you'll see a chart that outlines what practices teachers need to do more of and what practices need to be whittled down or thrown out altogether. The focus can be on best practices, inquiry learning, interdisciplinary studies, project-based learning, or authentic instruction. Whatever it may be called, the swing is more about depth than breadth. The long-term result versus short-term knowledge. Take a moment to look at these ideas. Basically, students are ready and they want immediate results. And sometimes when I'm in front of my class, I feel like I'm an actress and doing more entertaining or running a circus than teaching. And that is a little true. Students need to be engaged. There's no more of that sit and get, lots of action and movement, and they need to be taught in different ways so that we can reach those different intelligences. We can reach our visual learners, our auditory, kinesthetic, interpersonal learners, intrapersonal learners. And this really requires knowing our students. Differentiation needs to happen, giving students what they need at their level, and giving them choice, providing that gradual release of responsibility. We need to take those moments to find out what our students know through formative assessments in order to drive our instruction, whether it be through exit slips, post-its with things that stuck with them from the lesson, or thumbs up and thumbs down, and giving feedback to tell our kiddos what they're doing correctly and how they can improve. Making connections among different parts of the curriculum, and allowing students to talk and learn from one another. These are all practices that need to happen more. Now, in the next few pages, you'll be introduced to 14 interlocking principles or theories which emulate best practice teaching. You'll see a Venn diagram that illustrates how these principles are clustered and related. The first best practice principle is student-centered. Student-centered classrooms create a climate of inquiry, building on their own curiosity about the world. Allowing students to be self-motivated by creating questions about the topic will stimulate their commitment to learning about it. Providing them guidance as if a coach or a model by sharing examples of our life experiences and learning paths with them to help them see how they can become lifelong learners. In my classroom, I have done this through choice boards, where everyone is focusing on a similar skill or end result, but they have choices as to how they want to demonstrate their learning. It may be through the book they are choosing to read, but it must be on a particular genre. But students are the one who make that final choice. Learning experience should be authentic. Providing real-world applications for their learning makes it more meaningful. Read aloud stories that are above their levels and expose them to the rich vocabulary while teaching them how to use context clues to figure out those unfamiliar words. Allow them time to figure out how to break that birthday cake up evenly among their classmates instead of giving a fraction to figure it out. At times, it might be letting them choose what they want to study, as long as it follows the guidelines you've provided. All of these are authentic, real ways of thinking and creating knowledge. In 6th grade, we complete a social issues novel study focusing on the civil rights era. And at the end, they have a choice of whether they can create a poster, a t-shirt, or campaigns to demonstrate how we should treat one another. The novels help to deepen their understanding of human experiences and relationships, and will ultimately help them with dealing with others in the real world, or reflect upon themselves and their own lives, knowing that there is always a choice in the path that they can take. Making subjects connect to one another is the idea behind the principle of learning being holistic. Breaking things into subparts makes learning disconnected. Have them dive into things wholeheartedly, fully, to see how all the parts work together from the beginning instead of pulling it all together at the end. Utilizing mini lessons and teachable moments throughout a unit is in its entirety to make connections to the whole. While reading a book, using mini lessons on the use of adjectives within the book and applying that to zooming in on details in their writing narrative is one example of incorporating the holistic principle. From Saturday's class on one of the graphics for gradual release of responsibility was that triangle that broke down what learners most remember. 90% of what is most remembered is by doing. Therefore, allow students to do, not just sit and get or worksheets. Use that gradual release of responsibility model. Release the responsibility to the students, having them experiments, use manipulatives, survey, and think and experiment to think deeper and be immersed in their learning. School should be challenging. It should ask students to push themselves above and beyond with inquiry. A quote from the text that really captures this meaning is on page 13. The idea of getting students off cognitive welfare and into taking responsibility for their own learning is an earmark of best practices. We don't want to do that spoon feeding where students can just sit idly by. We want them to find their answers with guidance leading to independence and finding it more on their own than just sitting and listening to the teacher talk. A quote I use often in my classroom is, "Everything is hard before it becomes easy." My students know I will support them, but they need to be the ones to put forth that extra effort. And I'm not going to simply sit and give them the answers. I give a lot of wait time, especially when you're challenging students. Our next principle is the cognitive area. In order for powerful learning to happen, we need students to use higher level thinking by providing cognitive experiences. Experiences that allow them to apply their metacognition, that understanding of making meaning and self-monitoring of understanding, analyze, interpret, evaluate, draw inferences, and activate their schema or background knowledge, looking toward those higher levels of Bloom's taxonomy. Understanding the developmental level of the students you are working with is important as well. There is a book called Yardsticks by Chip Woods, and this does an excellent job of breaking down grade level and age groups of children and where they're developmentally at, what they're ready to learn, and what they can handle academically, socially, and emotionally. For example, the yardstick evaluation of 6th graders said that they are ready to look and analyze the social world around them. Therefore, my social issues unit is just right for them developmentally. The key to children's learning involves their construction of ideas and systems. The key is to provide time, immerse them in their learning. Give them multiple ways to express their ideas. Discussions, presentations, conferring, brainstorming, different types of drama. Also, encourage students to reflect on what they're learning and how it was accomplished. Have them see the challenges that they overcame. Celebrate those successes. Allow them to pick pieces for a year-long portfolio in order to show growth. My students in both reading and English have file folders, and these are for the purposes of conferences where they can show parents where they've been, activities they've participated in that brought them to the point that they're at. And students can also reflect on their writing pieces from the beginning of the year and see how their stamina for writing has grown and how their ideas have developed and the progress that they've made throughout the year. Lastly, we come to the interactive principle. When classrooms are interactive, students are sharing their thinking as well as learning how others learn. They benefit from the interactive nature of learning. The new ideas or ways of learning that are considered and sharing is happening. That collaborative nature creates a community of learning. The supportive nature built in the beginning of the year creates interpersonal relationships, safe environments that foster learning, and the idea that everyone works with everyone. Learning is a shared experience amongst their peers. They help each other to come to conclusions together. Teaching students to make intelligent choices creates the democratic nature of an interactive classroom. Democratic classrooms are ones that teach that we are all part of a community of learners. Democratic classrooms are culturally responsive to the needs of those invested in that community, teaching students to be responsible for their learning. All the information from the previous pages seems overwhelming. You need to find a balance between the activities you organize and incorporating intrinsic motivation within your students. Creating an environment from the start that fosters inquiry, creativity, collaboration, and all the other ideas that reflect best practices. It doesn't just happen overnight. It's something that continually is developing. The next slide that we will end on comes from my best practice text. And you'll see my little notes about how I know I'm demonstrating certain ideas within my own classroom, and also the areas that I need. I encourage you to do the same. Reflect upon what you already do that are indicators of best practice, and where are the areas that need strengthening. Take baby steps to create a classroom which reflects best practices, and you'll see amazing results. So this concludes our presentation on Chapter 1 of our best practice text. Go ahead and hit up Moodle and find out what the rest of the week has in store for you. Have a great week.